This is Funkopotamus Wes, a speedrunner who, as of making this video, is the first and only person who has set a world record in Call of Duty Zombies history by completing an entire Easter egg completely blindfolded, and he has just set another record. Many games have had similar blindfolded speedrun attempts, but never before has Zombies ever even been considered for this venture, and yet somehow Wes has managed to do it. The complexities of Zombies maps and the amount of steps required to complete certain Easter eggs leave many thinking that this would be impossible to achieve, so how did he manage to do it? Well, join me as we take a deep dive into how one man played a Call of Duty Zombies Easter egg he couldn't even see. Blindfolded speedrunning is not a new concept. In fact, it has been a relatively popular subgenre of speedrunning within games like Super Mario 64 for a pretty substantial amount of time now. Runners like Bubzia and Nabori56 have made a name for themselves in the Super Mario 64 speedrunning community because of their achievements in this particular field, and they get recognized for very good reasons. Since you are essentially attempting to speedrun a game that you can't even see, the way regular people would speedrun a game and how the blindfolded runners complete it is significantly different, and it's hard to even consider them similar in the slightest until the end result. So before we really dive into the speedrun and how Wes manages to do it, I want to lay down a couple pieces of blindfolded speedrunning terminology that you need to be familiar with to understand what he's even doing. First off, it's important to understand that in blindfolded speedrunning, since your vision is stripped away from you, there is only one other sense you can go off of to carry you through the process: sound. This means that sound cues in these speedruns are the main factor that guide the individuals, and in this case, as you will see, Wes takes use of multiple elements to determine his location on the map. We'll look into it more as we get into the actual speedrun, but in other speedruns for other games such as Super Mario 64, once again, it could simply be used to confirm the placement of Mario by punching a wall, or it could be used for more complex things such as this thwomp making a noise to signal a runner to collect the red coin above it. This is a very important aspect to these speedruns, and as a result, you will notice that those who stream these speedruns will always have their text-to-speech off, and have no other outside distractions that could confuse them with their game. The other piece of terminology that is extremely important to understand is something known as normalization. Essentially, normalization can be defined as a fixed way to do the same action every time with the same exact result. This is what allows Wes in this speedrun to find his way around the giant without even seeing, because through normalization techniques, he always knows where exactly he will be on the map at all times and where he is in the Easter egg. The concept of normalization is what makes these speedruns possible, and especially within games like Call of Duty Zombies that have mostly random zombie spawns and other things that would usually require visual cues, normalization is extremely helpful. I think it would be easier to understand it if we analyze his run though, so let's look into that. Wes begins his run immediately by running straight forward towards the teleporter into this corner, and begins looking to the right slowly while knifing in anticipation for a sound cue to play. In this instance, the sound cue of the knife hitting the teleporter confirms his exact positioning he needs to be at, and now he can simply walk to the right and down until he is officially off the platform. From here, he runs forward to the barrier, and you'll notice he once again knifes to confirm his location and slowly starts to make his way to the barrier to get the zombie who is inside of it. It is important to understand that this zombie in this particular barrier will of course not always be here. However, it was, and killing it in this instance actually saves a pretty substantial amount of time instead of waiting for the zombie to come to him. Following this, he rides on the wall to the left while backing up to get to his next spot, which will be in this corner by the RK5 wall buy. Once he is here, he once again uses this knife and waits to a point where the sound cue doesn't play to walk forward a total of 3 steps. Now, if we look at a previous run of his, the strategy here was presumably a lot slower because of the fact he immediately went to this location and was waiting for all the zombies to come to him, which you will notice is significantly different to getting just that one singular zombie kill at the barrier, since these zombies don't move very fast on round 1. Anyways, now all he has to do is get 4 more zombie kills, which will leave one singular zombie left on round 1 to ensure he has little to worry about while doing the Easter egg. After he does this, he holds right on the wall, running forward to head towards the door, and does make a mistake in his estimation of the distance to the door, because we see here that he struggles a little bit to locate it. But he eventually does open it, and now is the point where he goes for his first Gobblegum spin. Now, I think we need to take a second to look into his Gobblegum pack he is using for this game, because it is a very significant part of the speedrun that makes literally everything possible. There are 3 absolutely necessary Gobblegum that need to be used in this specific speedrun: extra credit, ephemeral enhancement, and shopping free, and as of right now, debatably wall power could be considered necessary. However, there is of course 5 in a pack, but the order in which these Gobblegum get dispensed to the player is abundantly important, and there are 3 possible combinations that will be a good order for this particular speedrun. Essentially, the goal of Wes here with this first spin is to open up the map, meaning he has to open this door leading to the animal testing area, this door on the other side of the spawn room, this door into the VMP wall buy, and the 2 doors at the top of the stairs. So to do this, ideally he would want to get extra credit on his first hit so that he can get to work opening the map, and then spend points on a second spin of the Gobblegum machine to potentially get an ephemeral enhancement to begin the Easter egg. But this of course can't and won't always happen, so getting shopping free first is not a detriment to the run either, and is in fact the Gobblegum that gets achieved first and one of the 3 possibilities for good Gobblegum RNG. However, if Wes was to say get an ephemeral enhancement as his first Gobblegum, it would be an immediate reset, as this is a Gobblegum that is needed after all of the doors are open, which is something that he wouldn't be able to accomplish without a shopping free or extra credit. So all in all, this means that statistically 1 out of 12 runs will get a Gobblegum order that works, while every single one of the other 11 games will reset because of bad Gobblegum. Anyways, in this particular run, Wes manages to get a shopping free as his first Gobblegum, and while he can't see that he got it, if he were to have an extra credit, ephemeral enhancement, or another Gobblegum, it would allow him to proc the Gobblegum. But of course, shopping free is a green Gobblegum, meaning it is time based and activates automatically. He then gets to work opening the map using normalized movements that mainly involve rubbing up against certain walls until he reaches this corner of the spawn. From here, he sprints forward a set amount of steps, which in this case was 6, moves to the left and moves back to open the door on the other side of the map. Now here he just has to back himself into this corner, open the door, and then again back himself into the corner to establish a normalization point for his maneuver over to these stairs. If you couldn't see the importance of normalization at this point, it should now be abundantly clear, because by placing himself in that exact corner of the door, he knew that if he were to just simply back up, he would reach the other door on the stairs without any problems. But anyways, he opens the barrier and holds onto this wall in front of him to reach this door and his second hit on the Gobblegum machine for free, in which he gets an extra credit. So far, he is in line with one of the 3 Gobblegum setups, but now he has to get back to the other machine on the other side of the map. Now to do this, you guessed it, he utilizes heavy use of normalization to guide his way back. The best way I like to think of this particular section of the run is kind of like connecting the dots. As we can see, he sprinted down the stairs to here, and let's just say that he is a straight line trying to get to this dot, which is his aiming point. To do this, he is not going to look in any direction at all. He is simply just going to walk forward until he reaches the wall, in which he will place himself in the corner to be in line with the dot. Now he has to back up to this particular dot to set him up for yet another dot, and in my mind, these set locations he needs to run to set up his normalization strategy properly are simply just checkpoints. Now that he's here, he just needs to run to his next checkpoint, but the zombie gets in his way, which surprisingly is something he recovers from pretty quickly. He continues to utilize this normalization until he makes it to the Gobblegum machine once again, except instead of going for a spin, he moves to the left and then backs himself up to this wall, in which he starts knifing until he doesn't hear a sound cue and moves forward all the way to the barrier to begin the Easter egg. Now, Wes positions himself like this because he is automatically assuming that he has an ephemeral enhancement Gobblegum, which in this case we of course know is not what happened. So thus, instead of getting a pack-a-punch weapon to start the Easter egg, he spawns in points. However, like I said earlier, this is not necessarily a problem, as now all he needs to do is locate the Gobblegum machine once again, spin it, and pray he gets ephemeral enhancement. So he does just that, and actually manages to get ephemeral enhancement, which officially constitutes this run as a legitimate opportunity at a record, and he knows it.
Well, there's no way that's working.
He goes back to the strategy he just did, avoiding the zombie while doing it, and now has placed himself right in front of the barrier for the start of this Easter egg. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with how to complete the Giant's Easter egg, it is extremely simple. It's not an Origins or a Blood of the Dead. Essentially, what you need to do is shoot this area outside of the barrier that Wes is positioned in front of, then go around and shoot 3 items that spawn around the map. Once you've done that, just go to the furnace in the VMP room and get the Annihilator. It's not a very complex Easter egg. However, while blindfolded, anything becomes pretty difficult. From here, he aims in and starts shooting while moving in increments until he makes contact with the button to initiate the Easter egg. So Wes gets to work with the first thing he needs to shoot, and actually the way he is lined up to shoot the button outside of the map is the same exact positioning he needs to be to enter this door frame, in which he just goes right against this wall and forward until he reaches this specific hole in the wall. Now, the angle Wes has to achieve to get this first item shot is extremely precise, especially since he's going to be throwing a grenade to achieve this specific item. Because of this, knifing to understand where he is physically in front of the barrier has to be done, alongside the adjustments to the perspective view to achieve the perfect arc. And unfortunately, because of that, Wes was not fast enough and the zombie got to him. The run isn't over, however, and he just backs up to the mystery box location to wait out the zombie. Once the zombie approaches him, he makes his way back to the window, knifes to the left side until he can't hear a sound cue, and does the same for the top and throws his grenade, which works. Now, I should probably take a second to explain yet another key factor to the speedrun, center view. Center view essentially takes the perspective of the character, which in this case was angled up, and recenters it so Wes knows exactly where the player is looking at all times. It's kind of like using the camera in Super Mario 64, for instance, when you lock back to the front-facing view, and this allows him to readjust his positioning in preparation for the next item. Now, to get to his next item, which is located in the VMP room, he does similar movements to what he did to get over there earlier, but now he backs himself all the way up to this wall and does something interesting. By using the knife technique we've talked about all video, he is able to angle his perspective correctly to be able to shoot the next location, which in this case is all the way inside this barrier. But he uses normalization once again to get him to that particular barrier for the item. He then crouches and then just slightly angles his camera upwards, which is something that he does utilizing the arrow keys on his keyboard. And finally, he activates ephemeral enhancement on his MR6 to get the explosive pistols. These explosive pistols are what make this possible, as generally he's not going to hit the actual target dead on, and instead it'll give him some leeway with splash damage. Unfortunately though, Wes didn't predict the exact location precisely enough, and missed a couple of his shots, which forced him to readjust. He did get it eventually though, but now he has to move quickly because he still needs these pistols for the last location. So to do this, he makes his way to the stairs, goes up, and actually messes up his placement, putting him into the room to the left, which is not what should have happened. However, he wasn't in the room fully enough to cause a reset, and he did manage to recover eventually, placing him in this corner. But he has to be fast because that ephemeral is winding down extremely quickly, and he knows it. He gets his positioning right with the knife and makes his way to this corner of the room to shoot past this area to his final target, which is located a pretty long distance away. Wes sprays into it and it isn't working because he keeps on hitting this pillar. But with literal seconds on the clock, he manages to get the last audio cue to signify that he completed it. Now all he has to do is get to the furnace, and as he's making his way down the stairs, the zombie greets him halfway, and I almost thought this was the end of the run. But he recovers and returns to the corner where he set up his shot to wait for the zombie. Now I won't lie, this last part of the run is where it gets a little bit sloppy. I'm sure that the nerves here for Wes are relatively high and that it's harder to stay focused, but Wes makes his way into the furnace room and misses a lot of his key normalization points. Here he underestimates the amount of steps it would take to run to the furnace, and ends up going right too quickly, which led him outside of the room. And at this point, I thought he would be completely lost, but somehow, someway, Wes found his way to the front of the furnace, backed up, and officially broke his own record by nearly an entire 2 minutes. His final time recorded would be a 10-minute 17-second run. Certainly a respectable run, but even he himself states that he knows he can do better.
Hey, at least there's a lot we can improve on.
So Wes does just that, as only 4 days later on February 3rd, he would again set a new world record, this time completely obliterating his time with a 6-minute 22-second run, nearly 4 minutes faster than his previous record. With 4 minutes though, what could he have possibly done to save so much time? Well, surprisingly, this speedrun is very similar to his previous 10-minute run. However, there are some things that changed in this particular run that saved him a good amount of time. The first thing I surprisingly noted about this new run compared to his 10-minute run was that he never got a zombie in the first window barrier that he runs down to at the start of the match. Now, I think it's important to clarify that this doesn't actually really lose that much time, because as long as the zombie doesn't spawn in this barrier, he's perfectly fine. Another thing I noticed is he was a lot cleaner in the beginning stage of the run. Unlike the 10-minute game where he struggled here, for instance, he seamlessly got through it with no problem. But the biggest thing that absolutely changed this run was easily his Gobblegum setup, because it was substantially better in this game. He managed to get an extra credit first, which got him a second spin on the Gobblegum machine where he got a shopping free. Now, if he wanted a perfect time, this shopping free wouldn't be necessary. However, in this instance, it still remains to be much faster than his old run because he didn't have to run back and forth around the map. He then got an ephemeral enhancement and did the same stuff, except this time he managed to get the grenade throw without resetting his position, which once again saved him a lot of time compared to the 10-minute game. Additionally, on the way to his second target when he stopped against this wall, he spent substantially less time at this wall getting his position calibrated. However, something tragic happened when he was actually trying to hit the second target, as when he was lining up his shot, he accidentally killed the zombie, progressing the round to round 2. I was actually watching this live as he was streaming it, and I had automatically assumed at this point that the run would just be over. But somehow Wes manages to get his second target, line up for his third and hit it seamlessly, and make his way down to the furnace with only one singular zombie in his way. He didn't have much time and he had to find that annihilator, and somehow, someway, Wes managed to do it with a final time of 6 minutes and 22 seconds. This is just absolute insanity. For him to improve his time by 4 minutes in just 4 days is truly a sight to see. And I firmly believe that if he was to continue running this, he would easily find himself going below 6 minutes with the perfect Gobblegum setup. This run is absolutely insane. There was never a day where I ever considered a blind Easter egg to be possible, and yet Wes did it. I do want to emphasize that Wes is still continuing this today, and he has stated in the description of this particular video that a sub 6-minute run is entirely possible. So who knows, maybe we'll see him complete that soon, or someone else in the future. If you guys have not at this point already, please go check out Funk Optimus Wes on his own YouTube channel I have in the description of this video, as he is a very talented person for some of the weirdest things I have ever seen. Like, look at this, dude can play the piano while getting a star in Super Mario 64. So yeah, please go check him out, and while you're here, subscribe for more content in the future, but I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.